All right, so I'm going to go on the record and I'm going to say that 2024 is going to be an absolutely insane year for cameras, but mostly in one area. So let's break it down with my predictions. And the last camera we're going to talk about is the one I am personally saving up for. And I actually think that 2023 was a somewhat mild year for announcements until right at the end. And that's when Sony threw out the A9 III with this global shutter, which is going to absolutely revolutionize high-speed photography, sports especially. And I happen to have the camera, so full review is on the way. Subscribe. Actually, a few things that I've learned so far, which are really interesting, you'll definitely want to know about. So hit notifications on that, and let me know down in the comments if you guys want to see anything specific on this camera or what you guys are looking forward to seeing the most this year. But otherwise, it was really just the year of smaller cameras. So we had the Nikon Z8, which is probably the most underrated camera in years for some reason, but it is still literally a Z9 in a smaller body. Canon had the R8, which I had a full review on as well, which is a great full frame camera, but again, just largely a smaller R6II. Sony was probably the most interesting because they had the most new cameras, but really all of them were just exactly the same with smaller bodies. So you have the A6700, a smaller version of the FX30, and more photocentric. You had the A7C II, which is just a compact A7 IV, and the A7CR, which is a shrunk down A7 R5. And all of those are great cameras. I have reviews on a bunch of them. I would personally buy a few of those myself, so I don't want to diminish anything. But all of those, including the Z8, which is an amazing camera, they're all just smaller versions of full-size, bigger cameras. So in 2024, here's what I think we'll see. So last year was the year of the compact camera. 2024 is going to be the year of speed. If you don't care about speed, the only other bonus is that speed is probably going to amp up video specs as well. So first up, let's talk about the Nikon Z6III, whatever they call it, and maybe the Z7 III along with it. So I think the Z6III is going to be the first camera that comes out. It'll probably have a 24 megapixel sensor, just like before, probably with a faster readout speed though. So if you're shooting with electronic shutters, that's where you're going to see the biggest difference. But I don't think we'll see a stacked CMOS sensor like the Z8 at that price point just yet. But we will probably see a new processor. That's going to mean faster frames per second, especially in that electronic shutter. So that's where I think like 30 frames per second in electronic shutter at least is going to be very possible. You'll also get better autofocus with subject tracking, but I don't think we'll see like a big difference in image quality just yet. Nikon went all out with video though on the Nikon Z8, so maybe we'll actually see some video specs that blow away the R6II and Sony A7 IV. I'm thinking like 6K video, 4K 60 full frame, a 10-bit internal. Hopefully they finally added a flip screen. And this is going to be interesting for Nikon because the Nikon Z8, on paper at least, it blows away the Canon R5 and the Sony A7 R5. But every day, I run into people who don't even know the camera exists. So it'll be interesting to see if Nikon still goes full out with the Z6III, if that's going to be good enough to get people to actually start switching back to Nikon. Nikon's also been a little slow with updating some of their lenses, but we are starting to see some third-party options, especially from Tamron. So maybe like 2024 is when we're going to start seeing that flood of like existing Tamron and Sigma lenses converted over to Z-mount. Another interesting camera that I'm hoping to see is the Panasonic S1 Mark II, maybe an S1H Mark II. We got the S5II and the S5IIX, that's this camera right here. Last year, I just posted a 6-month review of the S5IIX. Those were actually pretty amazing cameras for the price. But the S1 series, this is the S1H right here, that's actually the flagship line for Panasonic right now. And it hasn't been updated in years. So Panasonic tends to be the best also when it comes to video. So I definitely expect the S1 to have either 6K or 8K natively, probably with a stacked CMOS sensor as well. So pretty much no rolling shutter. 4K 60 full frame should be guaranteed, but I think we'll probably see 4K 120. Panasonic features ProRes recording, anamorphic lenses, USB-C recording, a ton of features, open gate recording, so 3x2s, 4x3 aspect ratios. Panasonic might go all out with this camera. And I do think Panasonic's kind of high-end lenses are lacking a little bit right now, but the mid-grade options are solid. So I think they'll need to go pretty all out on this in order to make the S1 kind of justify people to switch to Panasonic. But I do expect this to be a pretty big release. And Panasonic has actually managed to keep their camera costs under control, unlike Sony. So value-wise, the S1 will probably be the best camera for the money, especially if video is going to be more important or just as important as photos. Now, the one I expected to see in 2023, which still isn't here, is the Canon R5 Mark II, and Canon released the R5 along with the R6 back in 2020, and then they updated the R6, the R6 Mark II in 2022, and in all of 2023, we had absolutely nothing on the R5. So if I had to take a guess, I would say Canon was going to do a minor refresh, and then the Z8 launched with this stacked CMOS sensor, 20 frames per second. And I think it's going to be interesting to see how Canon competes with the Z8 without making the R3 look really bad. And again, like, this is going to be the year of speed. So everything is about frames per second here. Now, video is going to be really interesting because the Canon R5 was very good for video on paper, and then you would actually use it and it was really finicky. So like, it couldn't record more than 30 minutes. It overheated like crazy. The camera can oversample for amazing quality, but it also made it overheat just incredibly fast. So then there was this none oversample, lower quality mode, and that mode, it would not overheat, but it wouldn't look as good. And then you could shoot 4K 120, but it was only in the all-eye compression, so the file sizes were just insane. I still have issues actually playing back 4K 120 on this camera on all of my computers for some reason. So hopefully all of these limitations will be gone and we can finally just use the camera however we want. But right now, I think the Canon R6 II is the best hybrid photo video camera on the market under $3,000. So it'll be interesting to see if with the new R5II, Canon can actually keep that strategy going. But either way, I'm sure the R5II is going to outsell the Z8, which is just, I don't know. I don't know why people aren't getting that camera right now, but Nikon is clearly winning on specs right now. Now, another big question for Canon is, where is the R1? We've been hearing about this camera for years. It's supposed to be the flagship camera, even above the R3, and I haven't seen or heard anything on that camera. But this year, we have the Olympics, and I don't think that Canon wants to miss out on having an R1 at the Olympics. But Canon is in a little trouble with this one. So Sony has the A1, which is the same speed for 30 frames per second as the Canon R3, but with double the resolution. And now Sony has the A9 III with the same resolution of the R3, but is 4 times faster. And I would be very surprised if Canon has a global shutter camera ready to go with 100 frames per second. So my guess is that they'll try to beat the A1. So most likely this will be a stacked CMOS sensor over 45 megapixels, 8K video up to 60 frames per second, 4K 120. It'll probably be slightly larger than the Canon R3, so a pretty big camera, but it'll probably have a more powerful processor and maybe even 2 of like the processors in the Canon R6 II. But I think where Canon is likely to beat Sony the most is going to be with the buffer. So Canon has typically been able to shoot more images than Sony before the buffer fills up. And since the R1 will have faster CF Express cards, a CF Express Type B, than what Sony uses, they will probably be able to offload their images even faster. So hopefully this is the year of the R1. I think Canon is actually running out of time to have units for sale by the Olympics. So we might just see maybe an announcement before the Olympics and maybe some prototype units at the Olympics itself, and sales might be pushed back to like September, October at minimum. But right now, nothing even comes close to Sony when it comes to high-speed camera. So if you're Canon, that is not something you want 6 months before the Olympics. But the camera I am personally looking forward to the most is going to be a Sony FX4 or A7S III. I'm actually shooting with the A7S III right over there, and I have no idea if Sony is actually going to keep these cameras separate or combine them into a single camera, but I'm leaning towards separate, and there's a good reason for that. So honestly, the A7S III doesn't even need to exist right now because it came out before the FX3, so it's the one that I own. But if you were buying one now, I don't think there's any reason to get the A7S III over the FX3. The S3 hardware is more photo-centric, but the sensor is 12 megapixels. So I only use it for video. I never use it for stills. So I think the FX3 is going to be the way to go if you were buying one now. But that could change with the FX4. I think that Sony is actually going to up the resolution. So probably around 24 to 26 megapixels, because that will allow 6K video. And I think we'll see 6K up to 60 frames per second, which will be really nice. I think the extra resolution is not going to help 4K. So I think it'll be tough to get more than 4K 120. But then again, I didn't expect 4K 120 on the A7S III. So surprise me, Sony. I look forward to it. But I do think the sensor will change to a stacked CMOS sensor because that'll help control a rolling shutter. It'll improve readout speeds. And I think if you combine that with like the latest AI autofocus system, some of the hardware upgrades we've seen in like the A9 III, including that 4-axis flip screen, which is amazing. They also have improved IBIS now. So what I don't know is what Sony is going to do with formats and open gate. So the Nikon Z8, for example, that shoots ProRes. It also shoots RAW, as does the Panasonic S5II. And Panasonic can shoot open gate as well. So you can shoot in like 4 different aspect ratios natively. And I really hope that we see this on the FX4, but I am not that confident on that yet. We have not seen much of that from Sony right now. Now, if Sony goes to 24 or 26 megapixels and keeps the A7S III body style for that camera, this would make it like the best hybrid photo video camera I think we've seen from Sony. And they really need that right now because Sony is just, they're way behind Canon and Nikon when it comes to hybrid cameras right now. Now, there are a few cameras that might not be at the top of everyone's radar, but they probably should be. So Sony, for example, they have not released an inexpensive, especially photo-centric camera in a while, like 4 years maybe. They've just been adding new high-end cameras and making the last generation ones a little cheaper. And that has been working for a long time. But now Canon actually has some decent, like really good cameras under $1,500. And they are competing with Sony cameras from like 3 to 4 years ago. So I'm wondering if we'll finally see a new Sony a6100, maybe a ZVE10 style camera under that $1,000 mark, with some of the new autofocus and video updates that haven't made it yet to Sony's cheaper cameras. Also, Canon has the R8 under $1,500 now. So that's a great full frame camera. And now that's going against the Sony a7C, which was launched 4 years ago. And even that was a repackaged a7 III, which is a 6-year-old camera right now. But let me know what you guys want to see more of this year. Cameras, lenses, maybe some drones. I think DJI is going to do some big things this year as well, especially though from content I'm creating. So do you want to see me create more reviews, comparisons, content on lenses, tutorials, vlogs? Not a big vlog fan right now, but I do shoot a lot of cars and maybe some BTS from some of those shoots. So hit me up. Plus, I finally, years in the making, did release my presets that I have been using for years. So I promise you, these look awesome. They will save you so much time when you're editing, and now they're available for sale. Link in the description below. But if you comment on this video that you guys are interested in them, let me know, and I'll hook you up with a huge coupon code for that. So hope you guys are doing amazing. Looking forward to 2024, and until next time,